This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. As a general thing, it is advantageous for a company if the CEO and the chairman of the board are roughly on the same page about how the company should be run and where it should stand on key issues. Unfortunately for both the fans and shareholders of Disney, there was no such agreement in the upper echelons at Disney during the Bob Chapek era. CNBC has now confirmed what independent voices such as ours already reported, namely that then CEO Bob Chapek wanted to make Disney politically neutral and win back the family audience, while Chairman Bob Iger wanted Disney to remain hyper-partisan. There were of course many other areas where the two clashed, but fundamentally that was the recurring underlying theme. In this video, we will explore the growing tensions between the two as we go through Iger's unwillingness to let go, Chapek striking back at him, and finally, Eiger resorting to outright sabotage to the detriment of shareholders. This is where you may be wondering, if Eiger wanted to get rid of Chapek so bad, why didn't he just fire him? Well, that would be because he couldn't. Even if Eiger controls the board, they couldn't fire Chapek without reason, and Chapek stubbornly did nothing to warrant being fired. But if Chapek wanted to remain CEO, it wasn't enough to merely do nothing wrong. He had to win and over-deliver, since Eiger's board was stacked against him. The result was a game of chess of sorts, or a corporate Game of Thrones, and one far more interesting to watch than anything Disney actually put out. And on the topic of games, a particularly great one that you should check out is Raid Shadow Legends, the sponsor of this video. This awesome mobile game has 700 unique champions and an intense combination of challenging PvE and tactical PvP content. One of the toughest bosses in Raid is a Hydra with multiple different heads, each one a complete boss battle all on its own. Among others, you'd go up against the Head of Suffering, and it's got the Pain Link, which lets it share some of the damage it takes with you. You'll need to bring some champions to take care of that Pain Link debuff if you want the damage to go where you want it. You'll also have to think carefully about which champions you'll have take on the Head of Decay. Its attacks are fierce, but they're nothing compared to its passive. Every time you heal one of your champions, they'll actually lose max HP, and on top of that, the Head of Decay also can use a new life barrier buff, a sort of HP shield thing on the target head, which will fully heal unless you can break it. Contrary to what the name might suggest, the Head of Mischief is no joke. It can steal all the buffs from your champion and spread them around all the other Hydra heads in battle. It won't go down easily, and it can even redirect your attacks, so if you like a challenge, this will deliver that aplenty. You need the right champion though, and to get you started, new players can get your hands on Stag Knight, one of the best epic champions around, as well as a skin for Stag Knight designed by JonTron. Just use the promo code JTSkin before October 7th, it's as easy as that. Don't worry if you're an existing player though, you can still get Stag Knight and the skin too through an in-game event. Speaking of legendary champions, check out Sun Wukong, Raid's take on the Monkey King from Chinese mythology. No demons to slay or journeys to the west to undertake here, just log in on 7 different days between now and October 23rd to get your hands on him for free. Now is the perfect time to get started with Raid. Use my link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses. We're talking the epic champion Drake from the Lizardmen faction and other useful things like energy refills, skill tome and XP booster. Once you're in and crushing your enemies and seeing them driven before you, come find me under the name Midnight's Edge. So just hit my link in the description and I'll see you on the battlefield. With that, let's return to the games Eiger and Chapek were playing at Disney. According to the explosive CNBC exposé that we have covered for the past couple of videos, Eiger chose Chapek as his successor because of Chapek's integrity and business acumen, not his interest in Hollywood socialization. In other words, Eiger chose someone who could do the numbers and all the boring day-to-day business stuff, while Eiger himself would deal with Hollywood and all the cozying up to celebrities and their agents that this entailed. Remember, Eiger lived for those 2 shower days, while Chapek was really good at the numbers and all that boring day-to-day business stuff. The article reads, "For more than 2 decades, Chapek earned Iger's respect as a shrewd cost-cutter and low-drama manager. Eiger especially valued Chapek for his integrity and operational expertise. At each of the divisions Chapek led at Disney, home video, consumer products, and parks, profit and revenue soared under his watch." Granted, the visitors at the parks may not be among Chapek's biggest fans, but just reading this article where more detail is listed, it is clear to me that Chapek is a problem solver and a doer, excellent skills that you want in a CEO. But as we saw in the previous video, Iger didn't really want a CEO. He wanted someone who knew their place, a mini-me who would carry out Iger's orders, and would do them in the exact same manner that Eiger would have done himself. According to the article, a source close to Eiger revealed that years later, Eiger would tell others he mistook Chapek's stellar operational track record for leadership skills. As we will see, claiming that Chapek lacks leadership skills is Eiger's recurring point of attack, though there is an element of gaslighting to it. The article continues though, this was a striking admission for Eiger, who prides himself on his emotional intelligence. In reality, Eiger wasn't making any such admission, he was making excuses to justify why he was undermining Chapek at every turn. The mistake Eiger really did, not to put too fine a point on it, was appointing a problem solver, but then instead of stepping back and letting this problem solver problem solve, he expected the problem solver to stop problem solving and just do what he told him to do, even if the problem solver realized that what Eiger told him to do might not solve the problem. Or put another way, in hiding what he intended to be a CEO in name only, Eiger made the mistake of hiring an actual CEO. But again, why go through this charade at all? In the comment section on YouTube and all around the interwebs, there is a commonly held belief that due to his close association with major Democrat politicians, Eiger knew ahead of time that lockdowns were coming and that with them, Disney's major cash cows, the parks, would overnight go from assets to liabilities. This commonly held belief, which may be unfounded, continues that rather than seeing his legacy be tarnished over that inevitable downturn, Eiger appointed Chapek in a hurry so he could be the fall guy. I don't know if I buy into this commonly held belief myself, let me know your thoughts on it in the comments. But either way, just weeks into Chapek's reign, the lockdowns were looming, and they represented an escalation in tensions between Eiger and Chapek. The article reads, Chapek wanted to furlough about 100,000 parks employees after Disney World closed its gates. Eiger advocated waiting for the government's COVID-19 Relief Act to kick in so the furloughed employees would have some government money to hold them over. Eiger called then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, both Democrats, to ask them how close the US government was to passing the bill. 10 days, they told him. Though it wasn't a creative issue, Eiger overruled Chapek. Disney didn't furlough employees until April. Heartless as it may sound, from Disney's point of view, it was Chapek that protected shareholder interest. The bigger story though is that he was overruled by Eiger, and this was leaked to and published in the media, and Eiger seemed to take great delight in that. The New York Times were running a story about how disastrous the lockdowns were for Disney and how Eiger had returned to save the company. Rather than denying the story and publicly stand by his appointed CEO, Eiger confirmed in a written statement. A crisis of this magnitude and its impact on Disney would necessarily result in my actively helping Bob and the company contend with it, particularly since I ran the company for 15 years, Eiger said in an email to the New York Times, in the process emasculating Bob Chapek in front of the entire world, as someone who wasn't up for the job, but who needed help from Big Papa Eiger. The article continues. Chapek was furious. He called Eiger and told him he didn't need a savior, dropping a carefully placed expletive or two according to people with knowledge of the call. It was the first time in more than 20 years that Chapek and Eiger had had a major argument. Iger would tell people no colleague had ever spoken to him like that before in his life. Aw, poor Eiger. That meanie Chapek told him off when all Eiger had done was undermine him in front of the entire world. I'm sure Eiger has dished out worse in his time, but he couldn't take being on the receiving end of it. But of the two, it was obviously Eiger that had stepped out of line, and this did not go unnoticed. In the aftermath, Susan Arnold, a chairman not under Iger's control, privately had a strongly worded conversation with Eiger about setting Chapek up for success rather than undermining him, according to people familiar with the conversation. As we'll see, Eiger didn't listen, but it was a necessary conversation. Clearly, Eiger had let his ego get the better of him. If anyone of even a slightly lesser position had done what Eiger did, especially if it was done to Eiger, it would have been a fightable offense. From there, however, Chapek increasingly shut Eiger out of day-to-day operations. And remember, the division of responsibility was that Chapek would do all of the day-to-day operations, while Eiger would do all of the sexy creative stuff, dealing with Hollywood and agents. That will get important later on here. But for now, tensions were increasing, and according to the story, in a meeting where Chapek was not present, Eiger told the board his relationship with Chapek had soured, and that Chapek wasn't exhibiting proper leadership qualities. And what exactly did Eiger think was wrong with Chapek's leadership qualities? Well, the pandemic was shaking Disney to its foundations, and Eiger believed Chapek should be working more closely with a man who had run the company for the last 15 years. Or put another way, Eiger thought Chapek was a bad leader because he didn't let Eiger lead, something Eiger evidently felt was his right after 15 years in the company. Eiger was also bad-mouthing Chapek in Hollywood to all of his actor, producer, agent, and journalist friends. Word of this obviously got back to Chapek, and it frustrated him no end because Eiger was actively undermining him every chance he got. Susan Arnold was supportive though, reminding him that in a year and a half, Eiger would be gone and the company would be Chapek's to run, and to that end, it had to be restructured. Bob Iger had already committed Disney to streaming and gone all in on it. Ever the problem solver though, Chapek recognized something that Eiger had not, namely that Disney were still structured like a traditional media company, where every studio head decided what to make and where it would be released, which meant that when it came to streaming, there were too many cooks in the kitchen and no accountability whenever things went wrong. All of this is in the CNBC article, but here there is something else worth mentioning which is not in the article, but which we covered extensively at the time. At this time, Star Wars had already failed, Marvel was in the process of failing, and Pixar was rapidly becoming a bomb factory. There are some pundits out there who like to harp on and on about how the secret behind Disney's success are their creatives, and just a few years earlier that was true, but it was no longer true at this time. By then, the creatives in Disney had largely gone from being assets to becoming liabilities, because in all fairness, the creatives had left the building and been replaced by activists. Audiences could tell, because in the name of diversity and inclusion, Disney's content, which up until then had been accessible for everyone and universally beloved worldwide, suddenly became divisive and exclusionary to the majority audience. Well, Chapek found a way to resolve this problem while also including accountability. Chapek created a new organizational structure more in line with what streamers like Netflix, Amazon, and Apple were doing. In practice, this meant the creation of a new distribution division, DMED, Disney Media and Entertainment Distribution. This division would solve all of the above issues by not only including accountability, but by deciding which projects would get the green light at all, and if they did, if they were going straight to streaming, or if they were going to the big screen. This is significant. No longer could a division head greenlight something like Strange Worlds or Marvel's Echo just because it was so diverse and inclusive. Instead, DMED would first decide if there was market demand for the project at all, and if there was, where it was going to go and how much it was allowed to cost. This meant that neither Marvel, Pixar, Disney Animation, nor Lucasfilm could greenlight what they wanted on a whim anymore. Everything had to go through DMED and its leader Kareem Daniel, who would decide if there was market demand for it first. CNBC writes, inside Disney, many executives saw the reorganization as a way for Chapek to shift the power balance away from Iger's base, TV and movie executives. This loss of power then was the cause of some major butthurt in Hollywood and many anti-Chapek articles with information straight from Camp Eiger started appearing. The most notable was the Variety piece Disney's New World Order leads to confusion and bruised egos, in which the new structure was referred to as Byzantine, i.e. more complex and confusing, although it in reality adopted the best practices from the likes of Netflix. The article strategically avoided mentioning that. The unspoken worry, though, was that under this customer-driven structure, activist projects for which there is no demand, like Snow White and the 7 foul-smelling activists, simply would not get the green light to proceed. No, this structure favored the likes of Deadpool 3, the only project we know for certain was greenlit and developed under DMED. Everything else that has been released up until this point in time predates DMED. So why did Iger allow this? Because he couldn't stop it, that's why. On this one, Chapek had outplayed him because the organizational structure was under the purvey of the CEO, and not only that, the structure was perfectly sound and defensible. Any attack against it amounted to, "This hurts my feelings." So no matter how much Iger badmouthed Chapek to his friends in Hollywood and the entertainment media complex, Chapek won that round. But just that round. Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but the very first thing Iger did when he formally returned as CEO last year was shut down DMED and fire Kareem Daniels. Iger celebrated this as giving the power back to the creatives, i.e. the activists, because Disney is all out of creatives. But that was later. At the time, there was nothing Iger could do but grumble, complain, and find other ways of sabotaging Chapek, which he did. According to CNBC, Eiger kept undermining Chapek, firing up all the studio heads who were upset at having lost their greenlighting powers to DMED, while Chapek actually went from win to win, putting out many bushfires and bringing the share price to new heights, despite the lockdowns and many other challenges. He gradually won over many of his former detractors at the company by simply doing such a good job. The article reads, "In hindsight, it may have been the peak of Chapek's tenure. Only a month later, Chapek found himself back on shaky ground." In March, Chapek and Daniel had made the decision to launch Black Widow, a Marvel movie starring Scarlett Johansson, for a premium additional price on Disney Plus and in theaters on the same day, July 9th of 2021. There was one hitch. Johansson's contract stipulated that her compensation was based on an exclusive theatrical release for up to 4 months. Since her contract was negotiated before COVID, this type of issue hadn't arisen before. Her agent, CAA partner Brian Lord, spent months negotiating with Disney executives throughout the organization, warning Bergman and Chapek that Johansson would sue for remuneration if they proceeded with her plan, according to people familiar with the discussions. Chapek viewed Johansson's contract as a creative issue and therefore Iger's territory. Iger had a long relationship with Lord and knew Johansson. This was his arena. If you're just listening and not watching the on-screen quote, I would like to stress that last bit there, that this was his arena, as in Iger's arena, was the editorial opinion of CNBC, and rightfully so. The deal Iger made with Chapek, again, was that he, Iger, would deal with all creative matters, meaning all that sexy Hollywood stuff. this contract dispute very clearly and obviously fell under that. And what is more, Iger personally knew both ScarJo and her agent Brian Lord. The way to fix this issue would be Iger giving Lord a call, say Disney offers this amount in compensation, Lord saying they want that higher amount, and then the two agree on a third amount between the first two. Iger would then tell his secretary to wire the amount, and then Lord and Iger would go out for dinner after work at company expense. Total time spent, 2 minutes. That's what Iger should have done. But that's not what he did. What Eiger actually did was decide that this particular contractual stuff wasn't creative or sexy enough for him, and therefore it was Chapek's job. And then he decided to not let Chapek know that he wasn't doing anything. While this is speculation, it is my opinion, and many others share that opinion too, some even before me, that Eiger perhaps maybe encouraged Lord to proceed with the lawsuit. Chapek had been on a winning streak lately, and for all of Iger's bad mouthing, Chapek hadn't actually done anything to put Disney in a bad light. Quite the contrary, so his detractors no doubt felt that Chapek was due for a black eye in the press. The lawsuit shocked Hollywood, and it shocked Chapek. Xenia Mucha, Disney's PR manager and staunch Iger loyalist, argued that Disney needed to have a forceful response, which she drafted and both Iger and Chapek signed off on. The article reads, "Yet, both Iger and Chapek disagreed with the tone of the statement, according to people familiar with the matter. Neither one stopped its release, because each believed the other should be in charge." Again though, this is the area where Iger formally was in charge. The statement in question used business terms doing it, but more or less accused ScarJo of being a greedy bitch, which shocked Hollywood even more. The article continues, "Hollywood talent and agents largely blamed Chapek for the statement. Chapek suspected that Mucha was pushing this narrative to the press, and rightfully so, I might add, though Iger's role should not be ignored either. Remember, he had spent all year bad-mouthing Chapek to his Hollywood friends, and here was finally some validation for what he had been saying." The article continues, "Eiger called Chapek and told him he should issue a public apology according to people familiar with the call. Chapek refused, and that was the right move. Eiger never even considered apologizing, according to people familiar with his thinking. And yeah, he obviously wasn't going to apologize. The industry blamed Chapek for a situation that Eiger had allowed, maybe even encouraged, to spiral out of control, and it blamed Chapek for a statement drafted by Iger's press secretary. Why would Eiger confuse those, to him, very convenient beliefs by issuing any kind of apology? To defend himself, Chapek solicited other members of the communications team to help him call reporters without informing Mucha. She had obviously shown that her loyalty was to Eiger, not Chapek. This is not in the article, but what happened from there was another round of chess or Game of Thrones being fought out in the press, with Team Eiger feeding the Hollywood trades and Team Chapek independently feeding the financial trades. We covered this at the time. Check out our Disney playlist, and you'll find we've been on top of this the whole time. Please smash that like on this video, help share it, subscribe, and indicate you want notifications on all videos so you don't miss out on future coverage, and always stay on top of things too. Rounding out the Scarlett Johansson saga though, Chapek of course settled and made that go away, but Eiger had delivered a blow that Chapek never fully recovered from, and it was about to get worse. Next, we'll explore the debacle in Florida. For now, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments, and before you go, remember that now is the perfect time to get started with Raid. Use my link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses. We're talking the epic champion Drake from the Lizardman faction and other useful things like energy refills, skill tome, and XP booster.